on what Henry shared about the mantle makes me wonder if it's not some of that comes from the calling that was on our forefathers' lives, and it was never completed. They went that far with it, but God is looking for a generation that will do more with it. I wonder if that's not why so much of that gets passed down. I do believe it gets passed down even though it gets completed. Don't hear me wrong. But a lot of our forefathers our grandfathers is where God was moving. God had a desire for their generation, and it never came to pass what God had in mind. It was falling short of what God wanted. Then when we pick up the mantle of our forefathers and we actually take it, then the culture doesn't see that we're doing it, but we actually are. Because the culture allows you to go so far with it, and then after that, it's, So that's what I've seen on that, Henry. So I believe it's powerful that you pick up that mantle. Good morning, everyone. I have a message today. It's not God's fault. So, whatever's happening, whatever's going on, wherever you're at in life, whatever went wrong, whatever wasn't quite like you thought, you can establish one thing right away: it's not God's fault. Okay? Let's go to Genesis. I'm going to read Genesis 1:24 to 2:1. Genesis 1, verse 24 to chapter 2, verse 1. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping things, beasts of the earth after his kind." And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. Everyone say good. Good. And God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, over the cattle, over all the earth, over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth." So God created man in his image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, "Be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth, subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, and over everything that moveth upon the earth." And God said, "Behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in the which is the fruit of a tree yieldeth seed. To you it shall be for meat. And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat." And it was so. God saw everything that he was, and God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. Everyone say, very good. Very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished. Everyone say, finish. Finish. So it was complete. God was finished, right? He did it. He fulfilled exactly what he wanted. Now at that point, do you think, what are the chances of Adam going up to Eve and saying, "Man, I got pain in my side. I think I need a pending operation. Man, this thing is just really..." No. You think, or what was the chance of Eve going and saying, "You know, I'm half depressed today. I'm kind of having the baby blues or under the weather," or what was the chance of that? Zero. Why? Because God didn't create that. However, that stuff came, but it wasn't God's fault. That stuff came because the devil caused trouble. And someone listened to the devil. And so we had a set of problems we didn't have before. God in his mercy, he still didn't let us go. He decided to make a new covenant. He made a covenant with a group of people when he led them out of Egypt. And in Hebrews 8 it says it was a covenant that our fathers couldn't keep. So the Lord made a new covenant, not like that covenant. And so here he made a new covenant with a group of people that made him look terrible, blasphemed his name for hundreds of years, over and over again. They left him. They rejected him. They left the ways of his servant David and did not serve the Lord. But they were influenced by the heathen neighbors around them. I mean, how many times did that happen? So when Jesus said, when Peter asked Jesus, shall I forgive my brother 7 times? Jesus said, forgive him 70 times 7. Now, Jesus spoke only what he heard the Father speak. And the Father, I believe, spoke only what he already did or was doing. God is not asking us to do something he did not already do. When I got that revelation that 70 times 7 had a new meaning to me. God was asking, Jesus spoke what he heard the Father say. And the Father said, forgive 70 times 7 to your brother. He had just done that with a whole nation throughout those hundreds of years where they had just, he forgave him, he heard their cry. And by the time he turned around, they were doing it again. He forgave and heard their cry. And he blessed them again and brought victory to them. When he turned around, they were doing it again. I mean, that is pathetic if you read the Old Testament. It is awful. It was more bad than good through the kings. Right? I mean, people use the name Josiah for their children. Why? Because he was a good king. Most of the king names, you don't hear namesakes from those kings. Because it's not anything that great. But Ahab. You don't hear much of it. But so here God made a new covenant with a group of people that you would have thought in the natural he was about tired of them. But he made a new covenant. And Jeremiah 32 verse 40 is the same as Hebrews 8 verse 8. We'll go to Jeremiah 32. Maybe I do need this a little bit. It goes right here, right? I was Jeremiah 31. Sorry. Jeremiah 31 first. Verse 31. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which my covenant they break, although I was a husband unto them, saith the Lord. And this shall be the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel. After those days, saith the Lord, I will put my law in their inward parts, and will write it in their hearts, and will be their God, and they shall be my people. And they shall No more teach, no more every man his, and they shall teach no more every man his neighbor, and every man his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them, saith the Lord. For I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sin no more. That word for word is almost exactly in Hebrews 8, starting at verse 8, 9, and 10. If you look really closely at that, I believe that is like the heartbeat of the whole new covenant. I believe if you're a minister of the new covenant, I believe if you're using your spiritual gifts for the new covenant, I believe that your gift comes out around God's heart. God's heart for the new covenant is where He wants to speak. He wants to reach every person, and your gift is to make that happen. Where the gift of prophecy in the Old Testament was to hear God and tell the people. The gift of prophecy in the New Testament is still to hear God and tell the people, but then also help the people hear God. And then God went a little bit farther. I believe God went as far as He could without breaking the rule of, without breaking the choice, freedom of choice. Turn to Jeremiah 32, verse 40. And I will make an everlasting covenant with them, and I will not turn away from them to do them good. But I will put my fear in their hearts, that they shall not depart from me. I don't exactly know what that means, but I believe God came as close as He could without breaking the thing of freedom of choice when He made the new covenant. Because Joel writes, I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh. And it shall come to pass afterwards, I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, upon your sons and daughters. And if that wouldn't be enough, he went on to say, and also upon your servants and handmaidens, to make sure nobody is excluded. So your sons and your daughters. Now, if you have servants that aren't as important to you as your sons and your daughters, those are also included. So he says all flesh, and then he says sons and daughters. Then just in case you didn't get the all flesh part, he writes, and also upon your servants and handmaidens. Nobody is excluded. So now we live in a new covenant. Jesus came, and His blood was the blood of that new covenant. He said, my blood is the blood of the New Testament. So when He came, He provided help, healing to everyone that asked. Is it recorded anywhere in the New Testament that God said, no, I can't help you because God is spanking you? I wasn't able to find it one time. Is it anywhere recorded in the New Testament that Jesus didn't raise someone from the dead because God said, well, I wanted that rose in my garden, now you wrecked my garden? I don't find it recorded that way. Suppose it was God's will that they died or that they got sick, then Jesus went against God's will. It's not recorded that it was that way. It's recorded that everyone that asked for help got help. And so we are ambassadors for Christ. We live in the time of the new covenant. This is my personal opinion. I believe the time of the new covenant is a time frame that God has where He's extending His mercy and grace to draw people to Himself. And I believe we're still in that time frame. There is recordings of God, of someone being sick or hardship because of disobedience. That recording is in the Bible. But when Jesus came, There wasn't any of that. And we're still living in the time when Jesus came. Because we're ambassadors for Christ. We're extending the time that he was here. And how long that time is, I don't know. But what inspired this message was, how many times does something go wrong, and for some reason we think about God, it's God's fault. And that is Satan's, probably one of his favorite things is to raise havoc. And on top of that havoc, he gets you to think that it's God's fault. That is like a double win for him. He raised havoc in your life, then he gets you to think that God is doing it. That is just... So, when we don't see healing, when we have pain, when we have troubled times, we can establish something even though we don't have results. It's not God's fault. I believe that's the first establishment needed to be able to see the results you want to see. How can you get anywhere when you think it's God's fault? Of course, open doors aren't good either. Now, I believe there's something like an open door. I believe Ananias and Sapphira had an open door. I believe they were just... They dropped over dead right in the time when people were raising people from the dead. So, but I don't believe there's anywhere, I couldn't find it in the New Testament anywhere where someone had a desire to come back to God and God rejected them. You can find the flavor in the Old Covenant where Saul repented in words and yet it was denied him. But I couldn't find that in the New Testament. So I believe we are living in a time frame where God is extending his mercy, he's extending his grace, he's extending time. I actually think he's extending time because of his love for people. His love that all men would come to know him. We're living in a time frame I believe is actually extended for the sake of Jesus Christ. Because Jesus on the cross, he paid for everyone. And so to get as most worth out of that, God is extending time right now. Because it's enough for everyone. That was my message. I'm done.